Something that has haunted me for the past 10 years here on BookTube is my TBR. We do have my apple crates behind me. These are 2, 4, 6 apple crates at this point that are full of my books that I want to read. And in 2023, I made it a goal where I wanted to get through my full physical TBR / ebook TBR of books that I had acquired December 31st of 2022 or before. At the beginning of the year, I started, I think, with a library. This might seem small to some people, especially because I just watched someone's video yesterday where they were like, I have 1,000 book personal collection. Starting on January 1st, I had 176 books. This is between physical and ebooks. And looking at my yearly charts for the year of 2023, I realized very heavily that I am not reading those books. I've unhauled a crap load of them because I've decided they're just not books I'm into. Over 54% or so have been books that have been books added to my TBR this year. Old TBR is only 21% of the books that I read. And I've read at this point 133 books, actually 134. This does include like single issue comics, but that's beside the point. 75 books on my old TBR list, books that I acquired before this year that I have not read. This is going to be a little bit of an experiment to see if I can go through some of those books that are the oldest on my TBR, if they are intriguing to me, if I still want to read them. If it's intriguing to me right now, I'm going to pick up that book and read it. So maybe this will cause a secondary video. But for now, we're going to pick 10 books today. We're going to read probably like 25 to 50-ish. No, it's probably like 25 pages / the first chapter. Review my interest level. I'm not going to necessarily rank that. It's going to be like a yes or a no. We're going to start at the very beginning. Very beginning of my TBR, we're going to see a lot of old books, so I do apologize. They're not going to be the most interesting, niche, cool books that are out there. We're going to read the beginning of them. First one, Michael Crichton's Airframe. If you don't know, I have several videos on this channel about Michael Crichton and my love of his books, of the things that have been adapted. And this one, I believe, is supposed to be set on a plane. It says 3 passengers are dead, 56 are injured, the interior cabin virtually destroyed, but the pilot manages to land the plane. At a moment when the issue of safety and death in the skies is paramount in the public mind, a lethal midair disaster aboard a commercial twin jet airliner bound for Hong Kong to Denver triggers a pressured and frantic investigation. The next one is 1Q84 by Haruki Murakami. I have 2 versions of this book. I'll grab the version that's on my TBR shelves because the other version is a little bit harder to get to, so I'll be right back. It is a chunker, but this is 1Q84. Yeah, oh, I love this. This vellum cover is another reason why I've kept both copies. The year is 1984 and the city is Tokyo. A young woman named Ayamame follows the taxi driver's enigmatic suggestion and begins to notice puzzling discrepancies in the world around her. She has entered, she realizes, a parallel existence which she calls 1Q84. Q is for question mark. A world that bears a question. Meanwhile, an aspiring writer named Tango takes on a suspect ghostwriting project. He becomes so wrapped up with the world and its unusual author that soon his previously placid life begins to come unraveled. The other edition I have is split up into 3 paperbacks, and I've read at least the first paperback. Third one, ooh, this is good. This is Watchmen. Watchmen is Alan Moore and David Gibbons. Not a very interesting cover, but this has been remade into so many things. I think there's like a movie, TV show, so many things. I've tried to read this one as well, but this is a different type of superhero-esque world. It's a little darker. Parts of it kind of remind me of The Boys because it's very graphic at times. If you're interested, I will put up a thing now that shows you the actual description if you want to pause to read that. Next book is iRobot by Isaac Asimov. They mustn't harm a human being, they must obey human orders, and they must protect their own existence. But only if doing so doesn't violate rules 1 and 2. With these 3 laws of robotics, humanity embarks on perhaps its greatest adventure, the invention of the first positronic man. And it is like the classic robot uprising book. I think this one, I think it'll be one that I'm more interested in actually picking up and reading. Book number 5 is Meg by Steve Alton. Another one that I think I'm gonna really enjoy picking up and reading. This one, when I was growing up, we really didn't have a bookstore near us. And I remember picking up a mass market copy of the sequel of this book. I read that, and then I never realized until I was an adult that it was the sequel, and then here we are. On a top secret dive into the Pacific Ocean's deepest canyon, Jonas Taylor finds himself face to face with the largest and most ferocious predator in the history of the animal kingdom. The sole survivor of the mission, Taylor is haunted by what he's sure he saw, but still can't prove exists. The massive mother of the great white shark. The average prehistoric Meg weighs in at 20 tons and could tear apart a Tyrannosaurus Rex in seconds. Written off as a crackpot suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder, Taylor refuses to forget the depths that have nearly cost him his life. So, sharks. Very, very good. Next we have Philip K. Dick's A Scanner Darkly. It is Substance D, otherwise known as death, is the most dangerous drug to ever find its way onto the black market. It destroys the links between the brain's two hemispheres, leading first to disorientation and then to complete and irreversible brain damage. Bob Arctor, undercover narcotics agent, is trying to find a lead to the source of supply, but to pass as an addict, he must first become a user. That's a great description. Nice and short, to the point. Another one is Island by Aldous Huxley. This one I own as a physical and an ebook copy. Paula, it was a paradise beyond the wildest dream of man. No poverty, neurosis, injustice of war. Instead of making money, they learned new ways to make love. Instead of fighting, they chewed moksha, a fabulous drug which triggered visions of excruciating beauty. It was the best of all possible worlds until a guilt-ridden, spiritually crippled journalist with a shady past and a flair for the sensational deliberately shipwrecked himself on its shores and planted a fatal virus of corruption. Another Michael Crichton book. This is Five Patients. 5 patients, 5 human beings caught in the complex machinery of a large metropolitan hospital. Ralph Orlando in emergency, his heart stops beating. John O'Connor, 108-degree fever with unknown causes. Peter Lucchesi, his almost severed hand is reattached. Sylvia Thompson, sudden illness diagnosed over closed-circuit TV. Edith Murphy, a guinea pig in a teaching hospital. 5 patients, anatomy of a modern hospital. If you don't know, Michael Crichton is the creator of ER, and so this feels like it's gonna have very similar vibes to that. And number 9 is an old arc that I have from when I used to work at Barnes & Noble. This is Reincarnation Blues by Michael Poore. First we live, then we die, and then we get another try. 10,000 tries to be exact. 10,000 lives to get it right, answer all the big questions, achieve wisdom, and become one with everything. Milo has had 9,995 chances so far, and has just 5 more lives to earn a place in the cosmic soul. If he doesn't make the cut, oblivion awaits. But all Milo really wants is to fall forever into the arms of death, or Susie as he calls her. More than just his lover, throughout his countless layovers in the afterlife, Susie is literally his reason for living, as he dives into one new existence after another, praying for the day he'll never have to leave her side again. I put this book off a lot because I do tend to avoid books that focus heavily on death and what comes after, so this is very much like that. But the concept makes me feel like I can kind of what's the word, Bento? Superimpose. I can superimpose this as my new way of thinking of how death works. And book number 10 is another Michael Crichton book. This is such a freaking large book, but I have this 3-book bind up of Michael Crichton. It has Andromeda Strain, Terminal Man, and The Great Train Robbery. That is the starting TBR. Let me attempt to show you these 10 books in the order I just talked to you about. Oh my God, I'm not strong enough. There they are. Too much Michael Crichton. But we dig our own graves. We're gonna see if I actually want to read them all anymore. I thought before we start, I should really rank them in how excited or not excited I am to try to read the book. And then we're gonna start with the least excited I am for the books. That way I at least have something to look forward to in case these ones are truly shit shows. So right off the bat, I know that the Michael Crichton ones are gonna be the ones I'm least excited about. The first 3 that I am gonna read are Airframe, The Great Train Robbery, and 5 Patients. The next are ones that are kind of up in the air, and not in any particular order, but we have Watchmen, which like I said before, I did try to read already. Scanner Darkly by Philip K. Dick, and then The Island by Aldous Huxley. I love Brave New World for a similar reason why I like Michael Crichton, is it's very scientific and analytical, and I don't think this is going to be like that. This one mentions a use of like drugs, which is very similar to Soma in Brave New World, and I don't know if it's gonna feel a little bit too much like reliving the past. The last 4 that I'll read in this vlog, again in no particular order, but these are the top 4, I guess. Reincarnation Blues, Meg, because sharks, I think I'm gonna love this one. iRobot, because I think I'm gonna love it. And then 1Q84, only because I've read the most of this one already, and I think that it's gonna speak to me. Does that make sense? Time for a first check-in. I I had an unexpected time. I will admit though, I did not read 25 pages of each of these. The first one that I attempted to read was this one here. This is 5 Patients. And I got to page 10. This is way too analytical, not even analytical. This is way too literal for me. These 5 patients were selected from a larger group of 23, all admitted during the first 7 months of 1969. In talking to these patients and their families, I identified myself as a 4th-year medical student writing a book about the hospital. And this takes place at Massachusetts General Hospital in 69, and it is really supposed to be sort of a work of nonfiction. And there was probably like 5 pages in which he literally said, at 5 o'clock this person came in, at 5:45 we admitted 5 people that had blah blah blah, we had an emergency in which 5 people came in from a site. And it was just a little too like, this happened, this happened, this happened, this happened, without any like analysis. It was just kind of interesting because I was like, wow, they're talking about this as if like you've never seen any sort of medical show, which considering this is kind of a predecessor to ER, the final decision on this is that I am not going to continue to read it. I'm going to keep this copy because, like I said, I have a pretty extensive Michael Crichton book collection, but I'm not going to read it because it was already like so outdated. The next one I read even less of. This was going to be The Great Train Robbery, which I did attempt to read from here. This had a foreword as well in which Michael Crichton was talking about what the actual Great Train Robbery is, which let me pull up Google really quickly because I don't know. So it says, on August 8th, 1963, Biggs and 14 other men stopped the Glasgow-London Royal Mail train near Bridego Bridge, north of London, and stole $2.6 million. The armed robbery, which became known as the heist of the century, precipitated a massive manhunt, and Biggs was among the 12 robbers caught. It's a story that's been told a lot of times, and again, the historical aspect of it, kind of like a historical fiction retelling, is just not something that's interesting to me. And so like, there was some interesting commentary in the foreword that Michael Crichton wrote, which I didn't finish, in which he's talking about how quickly London and just in general England grew. That was super cool. And then I was like, wait, is this real? And then I immediately was like, I don't care about a robbery. And it's just so silly because like, this could have been such an interesting discussion to have, but I just don't care. So I did decide like 3 pages in that this is not, I'm not doing this one. So moving on to the one that really surprised me though. Airframe, oh my gosh. Like I think that I don't know. It's actiony. Like the first chapter is a major like turbulence event on a plane, and it was like graphic. I was really surprised for like 3 pages, not even. It was just like really intense, and it catches you and you're like, oh, I want to know what the hell happens to these characters. I want to know, like, each subsequent chapter it is doing the normal Michael Crichton thing where you are fed pieces of information and then immediately we switch to another point of view. So you're just like, no, wait, I need that. I want that one. Give me that. Like, I'm legitimately excited to continue this book. So, like I said, I will have a follow-up vlog at some point where I continue the books that I enjoy from this, but this, I'm very tempted to put down what I'm currently reading to continue it. These 2 are going into the collection and being removed from my physical TBR list. On to the next 3, which again is a mixed bag. We have The Island by Aldous Huxley, Scanner Darkly by Philip K. Dick, which is a movie as well, and then Watchmen, which has a movie. We're gonna dive into these and I'll be back shortly and let you know my thoughts on if I want to continue them or not. Another check-in time for these next 3 books that I picked up. So I started with Island by Aldous Huxley. Apparently I had started to read this and pretty much was caught up to the 25 page mark in my ebook, which was like years ago, I think. So I think I read the first 22 pages, first 3 chapters, and I wasn't in it. I feel like the plot really wasn't picking up as much as I would hope, and so I know that it's just gonna either drag on or there's really not gonna be a point at which I find it interesting. So we're gonna DNF this and move right along. I then read the first 25 pages of Watchmen. I don't know, there's just so much that I feel like is missing from the initial story. Like, I feel like it's sprinkled in, but I just don't find it very interesting, which is fine because I find plenty of other superhero stories interesting. But I think like this was finally the push for me to just not want to read it because I just wasn't feeling it. I know that some of the references in there are pretty dated and a little racist and sexist, and I just don't need that in my life. There are plenty of other newer books that I can read. And then I unfortunately had some lack of luck with this one, with Scanner Darkly, because it just, first of all, I feel like my skin is crawling because the first like 5 pages or so are about a man who thinks that he's infested with bugs and they're biting him and crawling all over him, and I feel like my skin is so itchy because of it. It starts to go a little bit into a character that is addicted to this substance D death drug. How it was being portrayed, and obviously it probably is going to change. It was going into like how addicted he is to it, and he's like, I only have 300 doses left of this death drug. It's only like a week's supply. And I was like, oh, just like how I don't enjoy alcoholism in books, drug addiction in books makes me feel similarly uneasy, and so it's just not gonna work for me. I feel like the writing in it is also understandably a little dated. I think this one is again from like the 60s, and so it just wasn't connecting for me, and I feel like I've owned it for a few years. I don't need to continue. I also feel like with this one, I'm solidifying the fact that I don't think I really like Philip K. Dick's writing. I think there was some sort of phenomenon in which I read The Man in the High Castle and it just struck home for me, and I don't think I could ever recreate that. So we're gonna go read the last 4 books and I will touch base with you after that. I am ready to report on the last 4 books that I read. I keep saying that I read the first like 25 pages of. So I started with 1Q84. I detest the writing style. Again, I think this kind of falls under like a category of books that I read so long ago that my reading habits, my reading tastes are very different. I don't really enjoy the drawn out explanations, the drawn out descriptions of a single moment in time for like 10-15 pages. It just felt a little self-flagellating or self-congratulatory, one of those two. After that though, great news. These next 3 books I've decided to read all of them, and like very soon. I read 24 pages of Reincarnation Blues by Michael Poore. This I'm assuming it'll get darker, but from the section that I read, it's not as dark and intense as I thought it was going to be. It's actually really beautiful, which is kind of cheesy, but we were introduced to the main character. The character is going through these 10,000 lives. We see like the course of their last day, then we see what happens afterward and happens with death, and kind of like what that liminal space between death and his next life is like. And it was just so calm, which I'm sure can't be what's really happening. And I also I'm looking at this and I'm curious if we're gonna see him in all these different types of lives. It was so strange, but it was just so cool. And so obviously very excited to read that one. I also very easily read 25 pages of iRobot. It has started out similar but very different than the movie, but considering this was written in, I think it was like 1950, like this shit's holding up. This is great. And it's not just the familiarity and like the knowledge that I have of what's going to come next with this whole rebellion, but it's just so cool. It is like a person being interviewed and going back in time to recollect these weird robot moments. It's a little bit reductive, but the first story was just heartbreaking. Like I legitimately wanted to cry, and then it just ended and I was like, oh god, I'm probably not gonna ever know how that ended. So it felt actually a little bit like Robocalypse, which was by Daniel H. Wilson, and it's probably meant to because this is a very old book, and so I could see why you would copy something off of it or try to create your own version. And then the last one I just put down after like literally like the first chapter, because I already know I want to read it. It's gonna happen. There was really no doubt in my mind that this would stay on my list unless something terrible happened. Actually, the first chapter is really interesting because it is from the perspective of a Megalodon. Well, no, sorry. It's not from the perspective of a Megalodon, but you're seeing a Megalodon like during the normal years. I think it said like 70 million years ago. And you're seeing a hunting event of this Megalodon, and it's kind of talking about, and then it kind of goes to the present. But it even hints that like it could adapt and survive the natural catastrophes and climatic changes climatic changes that caused the mass extinctions of the giant reptiles and countless prehistoric animals. And while its numbers would eventually dwindle, some members of its species might survive, isolated from the world of man, hunting in the isolated darkness of the ocean depths. And it was just really cool because it kind of put me down the normal shark obsessed like pattern, where I was looking up information about the size of these sharks and how long ago they lived. I might spiral during this read just to go into more details, but it was just insane. That being said, I have decided there are only 4 books out of these 10 that I do want to continue reading really quickly. We have Michael Crichton's Airframe, which is kind of like a thriller, and that one's written I think in like the 90s, if not earlier. Reincarnation Blues by Michael Poore, an old arc that I have from my job at Barnes & Noble. Isaac Asimov's iRobot, Sci-Fi Robot, and Meg by Steve Alton. So what an interesting perspective of like what my reading tastes are. We have like the typical just like big sharks, big robots. The plane thriller is really strange. I don't know why that is so enthralling. I think it's because, I will say this word every time, but Michael Crichton writes in a very cinematic way. And so it just felt like a movie. And I was like, hell yeah. Keep an eye out. Maybe in the next month or so, I will have a vlog reading these books. And I'll probably have another vlog going through like another 10 books on my TBR. Because this was just so, like, I feel so free. I feel like I have cut these away from my body. They're books that I've had for so long, and I'll be able to get rid of most of them because I will keep the Michael Crichton ones. But it's just, I feel like they were just weighing me down, like staring at some of these books that have been on my TBR since 2013. And I'm like, I literally am a different person with a different life, different everything. So I think it's just, it's a great moment. I get to put these up on Pango and leave them behind. Thank you so much for being here with me. I mentioned in my previous video that I'm trying to be a bit more authentic to myself and try to not create a standard that is not my standard, whatever. I know what I mean. So if you're here and supporting me in any way, like, I love you. Thank you so much. Thank you, thank you, thank you. I will see you in the next video.